Hi, everyone. Welcome to the April edition of the Reading from the Room series. Thank you for your patience as I had some technical difficulties. If you don't know me yet, my name is Livia Meneghin. I'm a member of the board of the Writers' Room of Boston. I'm so happy you could join us on this last day of April for tonight's Reading from the Room. For anyone new to us, the Writers' Room of Boston is a co-working space in downtown Boston for any and all writers, established and emerging, who want or need a quiet place to write 24 hours a day. We've been serving the writers of the greater Boston area since 1993. During and since the pandemic, the room offers online resources, including this reading series, as well as an online writing group with prompts and discussions. Last year, we inaugurated a series of interviews with guests knowledgeable about topics such as getting your work to a publisher, agents, and guidance for online publishing. Please contact us if you're curious or have any questions about the room and its programs at info@writersroomofboston.org, and check out our Facebook and Instagram posts at Writers of Boston. I will put all the contact info in the chat when I'm done speaking because I can't multitask. In any case, we always welcome new folks into our community, and we have different levels of membership. So if you can only come on the weekends, or if you want a virtual membership, please check out our website to get more information about that. In 2021, we launched this reading series as a way to reach out to the writing community during the pandemic and share wonderful writing representing a range of genres. This series is made possible by grants from Mass Cultural Council and Boston Cultural Council, and we also rely on friends. So if you enjoy this event, please consider making a contribution using the donate button on our website. Also, we are recording this reading, and a replay will be available on our website, along with recordings from past events. So let me give you all that info. Tonight, we have two poets who I'm very fortunate to be in conversation with and share with you all tonight. Our first reader is Sonia Aggarwal. So as we go along this reading, feel free to use the question and answer feature in the box at the bottom of your screen, where you can type in questions, and we'll have time for discussion at the end. So I'll introduce Sonia. Sonia can join me, and then I will introduce Heather Wright, our second reader, afterwards. So Sonia Aggarwal is a Boston-based writer with an MFA from Emerson College. She is interested in cultural and personal histories and the moments in which the two intersect. Aggarwal is a Pushcart Prize nominee, and her work has appeared in Swim, So Flow Pojo, Worship, Worcester Review. Excuse me, I'm from New York. Worcester Review, Quarterly Press, and others. So Sonia, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Liv, for your introduction. Yes, Worship Review would be even better than Worcester. But yes, anyways, thank you for your introduction. I'm really happy to be here, and especially can't wait to hear Heather's reading later on as well, and just to be a part of this community, especially for tonight. I have a few poems that I wanted to share with everyone, so I'll see how many I can get through, time permitting. Most of these I have tried to pick most poems that are newer, just to be able to share them, and especially ones that haven't, that aren't really out in the world yet. So I will start, however, with one that's a little bit older, but still brings me a lot of joy. This one is actually a duplex, very much after, for anyone who doesn't know, very much after Jericho Brown's duplex. The form, for anyone who doesn't know, the form combines the formal structures of the traditional ghazal and the traditional sonnet. And so this attempt at a duplex was actually one of my first, and I am excited to share it with everyone here tonight. So this one is called "In Leaving Her Mother's Home, which was never her mother's home." Every woman who has ever borne me has once sat in a train car in the rain. A flask spilled in a train car in the rain. It passed between blanketed arms that ached under the weight of lost homes and casts, pasts that kept breaking like the lotus's split root. My mother keeps breaking, takes the split root and feeds it to me with her own bare hands. My own brown hands turn bare. They still open to trace the grains along your dimming brow. To adorn your brow, I pray, I offer grains, and this, the last of my dandelion seeds. Here, take this seed, take anything to be those women in love on a train car in the rain. And this next poem is one of my much newer poems, but I am very excited about it. And this one is informed actually by the writer Chen Chen, who I admire greatly. So Chen Chen's original, The School of Morse School, it was very much so the inspiration for this poem. And in the original, Chen Chen really weaves together a bunch of different ideas, and it's very imagistic. And so this poem tries to, again, similar to the original, weave together a few different important ideas into the content and into the spine of this poem, and attempts to kind of bring them together in newer ways. So this one is titled A Date. God is vanilla lip gloss, and I am a fraud who has never read I Hate Straights, but memorized how mitochondrial DNA is inherited from the mother, and how my mother soaks almonds to soften their skin overnight and hardens her own when I hold a girl's hand. God is wet grass I offer a sweaty palm over. I wear pink boots and tiptoe around university politic. All my time is spent studying old white men or my parents trying to fit into structures never made for queerness. God is boba that doesn't get stuck in my straw. I chew on boba and wait in the park, visualize my nightstand, the sloppy letter to my parents I've been avoiding, and more sapphic literature I'm still afraid of leaving on the counter. God is warm sunscreen without a white cast. My eyes sift through shoes getting closer until I see one's open-toed, almost covered by a skirt. Now they know and wait for me. God is a green-eyed smile. I close my eyes. Before today, nobody has ever laid down a jacket for me. God is a jacket that smells like lavender. Today, I am more than another attempt to explain, excuse, or hide. Today, I kiss a woman under a sun so bright it almost hurts. And this third poem is actually very different than really much of my work and the kind of content that I deal with usually. This next poem was very much so written when at a time in which I was even more than today, kind of trying to come to terms with and reflect on aging, and especially, having close family members who are aging. And the speaker here is really grappling with that, with aging and seeing that kind of phase in life around them. And in this poem, like many of mine, the title is also the first line. I look over at the red, glossed and now covered with a clear plasma, peeping out between the skin-colored bandages we always made fun of. Too dark for you, who are so light for this dark family of darker brown. I used to look at my own cuts and scrapes as a child. You would scold me for picking at the dried out veins of blood and the scabs that formed on top before peeling away to reveal the uneven, wrinkled pink I'd poke and prod at, not knowing it would never go away. But now all I see in your blood is me, as you were on that night, a tissue crumbled in the corners of your eyes on the anniversary of what would have been your father's birthday. And when it's my turn, will someone be there to give me a tissue? Or will I simply curl into this, my own reflection, as I am now, standing dumbstruck, holding a not skin-colored bandage, looking blankly, stupidly at the square of white grief left to me to glue together skin and skin that will never again live the way it once did. This next poem also deals with family in a different way, and it also deals a lot more directly with body image and body image issues and attempts to move into the realm of body positivity as well. This one, like the last one, has a title that also functions and is meant to function as the first line of the poem. So it kind of just moves from title to the first line. As she sat down, the thin cloth of her sari gave way to the skin of her stomach, perched on top and out of the knot of fabric she tied on her hip and tucked back in throughout the day. I stared for who knows what, perhaps waiting for her to pull a pillow or jacket in front of herself, or hold her own hand over the roll as a modest, almost coy gesture of feigned confidence, as I was so used to doing to my own soft pouch that kept spilling farther and farther away. I looked away and looked back as she got up, retucked, grabbed a handful of key, and lathered it along her arms, chest, belly, as if it was something to be shown in the front yard, by the grass and sand, like the freshly shaven legs of my white friends in their new triangle bikinis, and not the thing that made me almost pretty. When my eyes went from her to myself, hers did not follow. Nothing notable. A girl, trying not to notice the outline of her stomach under her shirt, only to stretch the elastic over her knees and release the breath lodged in her throat to her chest again. Nothing she hadn't seen before. If only I had taken my hands, driven them in each canister of melted key, arm deep and dripping with fat, golden and sticky, until I was greased and glowing, the length of oily metal smudged with my fingertips, and she would finally see my body worth moving her hard-set eyes for. The pink stretch marks and dollops of brown around my sleeves and belt loops as something worth wanting to be. And then I have one last poem to share. This, like the first one, is actually somewhat of an older poem, but is one that I hold very dear to me. This one is a little bit more serious as it deals with and surrounds the issue of border violence in India, really between India and Bangladesh, which is a border that kind of consistently, even today, faces a lot of, it is a contested border and so faces a lot of violence and has throughout history as well. So this poem in particular is dedicated for Fulani Khatun, who was a young woman who unfortunately passed away due to police violence at the border of India and Bangladesh. Somewhere a brown girl. Somewhere a brown girl stands against a metal fence, practices raising her arms above her head, heels to the ground, telling herself she belongs here, in this country. She is of this country. Her parents tell her she can go back to play now, and she runs away, adding to the stack of pebbles her friends have made. They take turns throwing rocks, trying to topple their tower into an unsteady mound on the pavement that will soon be forgotten. These days, life stalls between the red ices, staining the tongue, the corners of the mouth, and the hours she spends by the stove, rolling dough, circling again and again, the rotis moving under the hard wood and hard hand of a child wanting to be grown so badly that her life beads around her temples and slips along her jaw on its way to the dirt, where all the other adults are, face down, eyes moving back and forth between the God they found among the grains of sand and now speak to of their changed will, their families, the promises they will keep this time, and the boots in front of them, cradling the shadow of a gun. The pebbles fall outside while she gives the roti to her mother, begging to turn it on the stove, eyeing the flame under her mother's hand, all the while telling herself she belongs here. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you, Sonia. That last poem, I'm still sitting in that last line. Thank you so much for sharing those poems with us and telling us about where they come from, whether from history or reality, or literature, excuse me. Um, and I hope maybe we can talk more about it later on in the Q&A. I realize I didn't give you all the links for the writer's room, so I wanted to share that quickly. But now I'll introduce Heather Wright, our second reader. So Heather, come on, oh, come on down. Heather Wright is a poet, essayist, and educator raised in the U.S. South and now lives on the North Shore of Boston. She's a former Soundings East managing editor and currently teaches at Salem State University. Her writing appears in Molecule, the Brooklyn Rail, and the Gloucester 400 Plus project, excuse me. So Heather, thanks for being here. I can't wait to hear your writing.
Thank you, Liv. Good evening. Thank you for having me. I am flattered to be invited here tonight and to read alongside you, Sonia. This is a real treat. As many of you know, I am a bit of a reluctant reader. I blame 4 decades that I spent writing alone. And though I feel my reading is improving, I have yet to quash the nerves, so forgive me if this is bumpy or scripted. As my friend MP always says, the nerves heighten the experience. So for those who don't know me, I'd like to give you a bit of background to provide some context for my poetry. I'm a recent graduate of the BA/MA program at Salem State University. In 2020, just prior to COVID, I returned to school to study English literature and interdisciplinary studies. A significant and motivating factor for my re-enrollment in school was to overcome insecurities related to never graduating, even high school. But it was also to learn as much as possible about the English discipline and to improve my writing, maybe to better understand why I had squirreled away poetry for 40 years. Other things you should know about me: I was born and raised in the U.S. South, primarily Athens, Georgia, and St. Petersburg, Florida. And I've been in the salon industry since I was 17, working as a manicurist and a salon owner. Subsequently, themes of regionalism, working class perspectives frequently appear in my writing, particularly the work that I've produced in the last 2 years. So I want to begin at the salon. Although salons are laden with stereotypes of being gossip-ridden and catty and often classist, they are more so a hub of community and a well of conversation. This is particularly true of nail care, where women sit together, manicurist and client, and hold hands and share stories face to face across a very small table. Due to my own barriers, mostly seeing myself as a low-skilled laborer, it's taken me decades to value those experiences, but as I've learned to do so, it has produced poetry and some academic exploration. So this piece is called The Manicurist, and it has an epigraph that you may recognize from Elizabeth Bishop's poem Filling Station, which reads, "Somebody loves us all." At night, a conversation of women populate my head, a congestion of feet, hands, and bodies. They sit in chairs with jelly-like nails, their wrists drape like fates at a party. 30 minutes, I say, as they swap recipes for childbearing, not making, and the bittersweet they'll pull from their yard. They pile up on one another as the brass bell hits the door again and again. The new girl has nails crusted with dirt and blood and uses words like broken and mess as I soothe the grotesque and mend the stress fractures. The chaos bends to a whisper. A client cradles my head on her arm, stares at my face, and says, "We love you, we always have, but I've forgotten their names." And so, as I mentioned earlier, I spent much of my childhood and early adulthood on the Gulf Coast of Florida. So I was recently given a challenge to write an ekphrastic poem, one inspired by art. And you can imagine my delight when I saw ink and watercolor depiction of an ombre blue ocean, so much material. But as you may sense from this next poem, I have complex feelings about the ocean, and this is called Water Survival. It also has a dedication to Cole Brower, who is the first American woman to sail solo around the world, and her voyage was nearing completion as I wrote this. Under the Gulf sky, sober sailors tell stories of a rolling frontier, nations of waves that lap gently or roar like sheets in the wind, bending, falling to valley, and rising in rhythm. Here, thousands of captains and oilers, correspondents, and cooks lift gently, tumble, and sink, or like Slocum, unable to swim, clutch hull and sail and circle the world alone, then disappear off the coast of New England. And so goes a woman with the first light around the earth tonight under the Southern Cross. She'll tie the knot back to port in Spain, having sailed past the three great horns, clipping her body to vessel by tether and jackline. At the union of sea and sky, she glides on a ribbon-like plain, over fathoms of cold, above range and trench and mangled ships, and grouper large enough to swallow humans. And like Slocum and Crane, she understands the sea is but the thin skin of a violent wilderness. Keep an eye on our time. This next piece is a quick jump into Florida culture around the late 1980s. It is called The Girl Who Sells Flowers from 5-Gallon Buckets. At sunrise on street corners in the flat Florida suburbs, a white van drops off roses, carnations, and girls, too young to work, but old enough to pass as women. At congested intersections, they stand and weigh flowers, scenting the air like burning sage. It's Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, Easter. They are taught to make eye contact with the drivers. The flower girls dress for the heat and do not sit, but stand, stray, under the sign for unleaded and diesel. Men pull over with wide grins and stories about women worthy of flowers. They lean on their car with bravado and query, and when their interests fail, they grow agitated and toss the flowers on the passenger seat. The girls always crumple the money. And if there's time, I have one more piece racing through, I tend to talk fast. This began as a stanza poem, but the narrative theme of it, I felt like it needed a little bit more room, and so it developed into a prose piece, making it similar in style to some micro memoir stuff I've been working on. It feels a bit serious at times, but the whole story is pretty funny. It is called Too Distant a Woman. When we met, my boyfriend owned a watercolor nude painted by his ex. It was a woman with tea-stained flesh and rose areola, the color of lipstick. The woman sat and reclined with her head tossed back, faceless, only a seductive jawline and a flood of paint descending to the hollow of her throat, where a limp necklace met her collarbones. He said he bought her at an art opening. I was young and disgusted by how her body sagged with gravity to the bottom of the frame, the pull on each breast mimicking the drapes of her belly, layered like wet sacks stacked in a line. Near her hips, she held on to a pink pastel cushion, her hand curled as if holding a cigarette. She looked too comfortable in his room. She was so half-painted that my imagination filled in the gaps of her fingertips, cuticles, and her crotch hidden by her right leg. The watercolor edges wide open, her body merged with air and blank paper. I disliked her. She was unromantic, with her breasts spread wide and her warped hand. She was both alien and invasive, too recent a woman. In her curves, I could only see the artist's hand upon my partner, his nightstand, and his toothbrush in the morning. When we moved in together, my boyfriend set her out with the trash, and in so cold, I considered it an act of loyalty. I welcomed her ruin among the apple peels, wet coffee filters, and the dead peace lily. Through the curtains and chain link fence, I saw the contradiction of her now familiar form, sandwiched between rusted bins and slick garbage bags, but I ignored it. That night, I dreamt of a caged horse, so confined the animal could not turn around, and I woke in a panic, my eyes mapping the corners of our bedroom. I thought of the framed woman outside, so in the small hours of streetlight and shadow, I crept to the curb in bare feet to reclaim her like some memory from the attic. In the 20 years since, she has leaned on the wall atop my dresser. I no longer dislike her, but I do not adore her. I just didn't see her in my future. And now she is constant, present in every bathroom mirror and reflected on every glass surface. Sometimes the frame falls along the wall and lodges behind the dresser, bent, slightly broken. I return her to the altar of middle age among the reading glasses, coffee mugs, and antacids, because I know that soon I'll look back on her with admiration. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Heather. No, come back. We're gonna do a Q&A. Thank you for those poems, and Sonia, we'll hear from you as well. Wow, I'm so immersed in your poems. You really set scenes up in a way that feels like I'm just listening to a story, which is very exciting. So I'll field questions from our Q&A as well as I have questions of my own. So I'll be selfish and I'll start. Because both of you referred to like other writers when introducing your work, Elizabeth Bishop, Chen Chen, Jericho Brown. I'm curious if just to hear more about how other writers inform your poetry, but also do you find it hard to like read for pleasure versus like reading as like a poet or as like a thinker? Um, do you like you sit down and what you want to read a book of poems just for fun and then you're like, oh wait, now I'm thinking about my own writing. Is that a fine line? Is that a blurred line? Kind of if each of you could speak to how reading impacts your writing.
Yeah, I can go first. Yeah, reading absolutely impacts my writing a lot. I feel like I joke about this a lot that like I don't read for pleasure, which isn't isn't complete is it's not 100% true, but it's like 90% true that like I am very much interested in the writing as in like in the craft, and that's something my eye will always go to. But like I also get pleasure from being able to understand other writers and understand the craft better through them and through different lenses that I'm introduced to through reading. In terms of in terms of writers influencing my writing, I think yeah, a lot of writers influenced my writing, and I think it's usually the particular writers and pieces that I want to be intentional about as influences in my work are usually pieces that just stay with me. Like they're pieces that I personally admire, whether that's because of form and structure or because of the way they deal with content, or even more recently, the way they deal with different voices and even, personas or portraiture. Um, and so, I think when I want to get inspiration, or when I use someone else as inspiration or a piece of writing as inspiration, I feel like it's the poems that I can't stop thinking about, or the poems that I'm mentally already going back to, that ends up kind of making its way into my writing or informing my writing in certain ways.
Yeah, it's a curious question. I think I find most inspiration from taking a break and stepping back and reading for pleasure, because it is difficult. There's either a wow moment when you're reading that you are so impressed by what's been created. but there's always a tendency to say, what am I doing if you're doing something that feels like it doesn't fit into a model of what's being produced. I know I get the poetry journal every month, and there's so many variations and so much going on. There are certainly poets that I admire in content and storytelling and form, and it's changing all the time. It continues to move and shift. I am eager, though. I feel like I have more work to do. I'm just getting ready to start an MFA program, and I cannot wait to dive in and do some more work and look at how it'll, consider hammering some of my work into more formal styles for fun. So yeah, I'm still on my way, still exploring.
No, your work is fantastic, and I have your book here. Sorry, my background's blurred, but just kind of to follow up for Heather, you write place is so important to your work, whether that's the you talked about the salon space or even regionally. For writers who have spaces that are important to them on any scale, like what tips would you have for them in terms of like how do you access a space and bring it to your writing?
That's a good question. I tend to return to moments, and maybe rebuild spaces around the moments. I think that for me, on an academic level, really starting to dive into creating work on demand, I would call it, inside of workshops and structured areas. The South came back to me. I really never felt as Southern as I did when I started to write. And I don't know if this is just a phase I'm going through. There's a good quote that says you're never more Southern than when you leave the South, because you don't identify when you're in a culture until you leave a culture, and then people say, where are you from? And yeah, so I'm surprised that the landscapes look so different. I'm surprised that the places stand out as much as they do, because I'm returning to the moment and rebuilding from there.
Thank you. And for Sonia, I I love listening to you read because there's such a rhythm to your poetry. The duplex has a lot of internal workings that are happening, but even outside of that form, there's a steadiness and a um I'm just curious, like at what point in the writing process do you pay attention to sound? Is that something that comes up early, or maybe after you've written a few drafts, you read it out loud and then you start to think about it?
I think I actually used to pay attention to sound too much because it was like one of the first things that I would think about, to the point where like the content at times would like take a back seat and I'd be paying attention to, like how we talk about like the sonic sense of a poem or of a piece. I'd be paying attention to that so much that like I would, like not be paying as much attention to the content or to, yeah, or like even to the structure. And so that is something that like I think I used to, years ago, like kind of start with. And that's, I think my, I think I do use my ear a lot in writing, but have had to try and kind of take a step back with, thinking purely of the sounds to kind of give way to other important aspects. But yeah, it's funny that you bring that up.
Awesome. Well, I've been doing this. It's kind of been a thing I'm doing. Very quick last question. Who are you reading right now? Or what is a reading recommendation you would give?
Oh, I am about to dive back into a lot of Southern literature to see what I can produce in my MFA program. But I am reading Andrea Cohen's latest, The Sorrow Apartment, and a novel by Justin Toros, Blackouts. And I'm not sure if it, Andrea Cohen's work is so unique. It is her style. I feel like it's an easy commitment. They're very short and dense, and I'm fascinated by that. So it's an easy read if you want to pick it up. And then Justin Toros is just wonderful work. Yeah.
I am in the middle of a few different books, but I just finished Aria Eber's Hard Damage, which I had not had the chance to read earlier. So I just read that, which was amazing. I also just finished Terrence Hayes' So to Speak, and I'm currently reading God Themselves. I forget who wrote that, but it is a book of poems. And it's very interesting the way that the way that the writer works with the page as, as space and changes the structures throughout is really interesting. But yeah, and also for a recommendation, because I always recommend it and it's my favorite, Olio, of course, by Tahim Bajes. Always gonna recommend it.
Thank you both so much. And I know we started a little late. I want to be respectful to anyone who needs to go have dinner. So thank you to everyone, to our poets and to our audience, for your patience with me. Thank you, Heather and Sonia, for just your beautiful readings. And it's been so great to hear your writing shared in this space together. Uh, Next month, at the end of the month, on May 30th, we will have our next reading from the room featuring Kelly McMasters and Carla Panchera. So stay tuned for that on our socials, and you get the invite and the links to join us next month. But thank you again, everyone. Have a great evening and hope to see you next month.